Hi everyone, we're live with Shamananda and John Atkinson. Here we go. Here's John. Say hi,
Hi
John.
everyone, how's it going? Excited for episode 15. Just want to thank you all for tuning into these lives for the collective. This is for you and just your expansion and growth. So, episode 15, we're excited. It's all about your restoration has no expiration and our healing journeys and how they are interconnected, Guru. And so, I just wanted to start out by asking you why do people view healing their trauma or their journeys more linear than like an actual journey? Why do they think it's like destination bound versus journey bound?
Wait, so what you're asking, say that in another way, just because it was just a little bit confusing for me.
Oh, okay. So why do people view healing as more linear, like on a line? Like, hey, if I go to a psychologist, I'm going to get answers. Or maybe even for you, hey, if I go to you, I'm going to get, this answer. It's more on a line. And as you know, and as I know, the journey is more the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys. And it's not so much, in a linear line. It's more of a journey. So as a journey is climbing a mountain,
Hmm.
um, and through that lens.
Okay, yeah. So I think that part of what happens in society, it's really interesting. They feel like if they do this, they get this, and we've been taught that kind of mentality our entire lives. It's almost we it starts when we're babies, right? So or children, we if we do this for our parents, then they'll give us this as a reward. So and it's so we think along the same lines with a lot of stuff. We go to work, we do a good job, we might get a bonus, we might get praise, we'll get something in return, and a lot of people want a clear set of instructions and how to get from point A to point B, and it makes them more comfortable to think of life that way. Well, if I do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then I'll get E, and that's what I want. So, but life doesn't really work that way a lot of the time, especially when it comes to consciousness. It's not a clear delineating line. So it's almost like you get to handle a bunch of things that are on the layer of your onion and take care of that layer so you can move on to the next. Now, the next layer might have elements of the layer before it in it, and it might seem kind of confusing. It's like, well, but I already dealt with that. I already handled that. I thought I already forgave all of those people. I thought I already went through all of that healing. But as the consciousness is like an onion, so it takes a little bit more time to be able to really get to the deeper layers. And you're not always going to get it right off the get-go. So it's a much more creative pursuit as opposed to a logical one when it comes to consciousness and evolution. So if you're going to be thinking of it as if I do A, B, I'm going to get C, then you're going to run into trouble. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Totally. And that's such a good mark in terms of our next question for the viewers is when people are healing, Guru, through your specialty is through the four bodies, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Why at times do people feel when they have healed their traumas, something happens that triggers them into their old ways or brings up the trauma back up to the surface, and it really brings them back around like a circular, maybe they're telling themselves a circular story. Maybe they're manifesting the same thing. So many times we hear like, oh, I quit my job, but then they manifested like a new job with all the things of their old job, or maybe a romantic relationship. They've manifested that. They've gotten out of a toxic one and they keep getting into a toxic one, or maybe a friendship. Hey, I'm not going to put up with this type of friendship. I respect myself. And then they they call that into their life. Why is it sometimes people think they get over that hump, but then they get almost like rubber band back?
Well, that's a good question. So, what ends up happening, especially with our neurological pathways that we have made from the get go, so and we've talked about this a few times, but it bears repeating just as a reminder. Up until the age of 7, we're running at about 1,500 neurological synapses, and they're all firing all at once. And then as you go into adulthood, they reduce to 750, they reduce to half. So the power of those synapses of the ones that you're using, they'll strengthen, they'll get bigger, and then the ones you're not using will kind of drop off. So you can use that strength and power in other places. So you're establishing a very specific type of safety scenario when you're a child, and your neurological system hangs on to that for the duration. So here's the thing. If you've created really strong neurological synapses, even if you don't use it for a while, it still can pop up if you're triggered in a certain way. So, and it'll feel like the same as you've always gone down that road. And it really does have to do with how human consciousness has been formed and how it moves. So, how to get away from something like that, or how to stop that from happening, is recognizing that that is a pattern, that your neurological synapses will always be there. I mean, over time, it'll start to get weaker if you're using, especially if you're using something else. The other pathway that you create, if you use it a lot, it'll be stronger. It'll be your go-to most of the time, but it only takes a certain kind of memory or a pain that maybe you haven't quite healed, yet, enough to get you on that one pathway thinking, is this the way? Is this the way I'm going to be safe in this scenario? And it can shoot you down that same pathway, so you're repeating the same behaviors and you're doing the same things that you didn't think you'd do anymore. So in order for you to be able to get away from that, you get to recognize the behavior, and then you get to reinforce the behavior that you want to create. So you get to be aware of what your output is, what you're creating, why you're creating it, and then you get to, stop the behavior based upon the types of things that you want to create in this lifetime instead.
So good. And yeah, you're right. We brought up the neuroplasticity of our brain in the past. You guys definitely check out. This is episode 15. Check out some of these last episodes as we really expanded on a lot of different topics. So, Guru, in regards to trauma in the 4 bodies, why do people say, and it's kind of been happening of what I've seen maybe with my friendships or maybe random strangers or people out there, is when trauma happens in the 4 bodies, why do people say they get over the hump, like we're talking about with the neuroplasticity? Why do sometimes people say, like, oh, I wish I didn't go back to that situation? Like, what is obviously with the brain chemistry, what you just explained, why is it hard for people sometimes to fully break away? I know you've explained this so well in past episodes in regards to what you do with your clients with healing the 4 bodies. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, I'm interested to hear some of the things that I said in the past that actually was germane to this specific subject. And I'll extrapolate on that because I don't want to miss those points. I mean, there's other points that I could bring up, but please do bring those ones up if you feel like they're poignant for this specific topic.
Got it. Yeah, so we've talked about in past episodes, you guys, about residue in your 4 bodies. And so a lot of times when we're going through our healing process, again, it's not linear. There's things that come up, on the physical side, the mental, emotional, and spiritual. It just depends on your experiences and what you've chosen and what, maybe you haven't chosen that has happened in your life. And you talked about the residue is like when we're healing the 4 bodies and really diving deep into that. If we haven't dug deep enough, there's still sometimes that residue that isn't fully cleared out. And so with that being said, when people come to you, your gifts and your way to transmute energy and the healing process is so impactful on what you do that a lot of times clients majority of the time, I would say, based off of my own experience as well, is they never have to come back to it, or they don't even think about going back to those situations.
That's right. And so part of the reason why that's the case is when you actually do a full healing and cleansing of all four bodies, then you're actually targeting the problem to the point where you're eradicating it from your entire being as opposed to just one aspect. If you're only going to hit one aspect and it's hanging out in some of your other bodies, even one, it can still linger. So, you know, as far as we talked about the science of you know, the neurons and how they work and why people hang on to, well, why they would go back to different types of habits. So part of the reason why they might go back to those types of habits on a spiritual level, because every single time you talk about a new body, you're giving a different answer because they all have different answers and they're all accurate. So in that way, with the spiritual body, then, you know, I totally lost my frame of thought.
Oh, good.
So no, it's like, you know, if it's hanging out in one of your bodies, you're not going to be able to completely release it. And so when it comes to your spiritual body, like it's like it is the most powerful part of you, right? It is you. And if you're not actually releasing it from all of your corners, then you're going to have these reminders. You're going to have these indications, these itches. You're going to feel like you haven't totally healed, and you're not going to really know why. And so in order to do that, you get to look at each and every body and understand, you know, how you're hanging on to it and why. So with your spiritual body, if you're hanging on to resentment from so and so, I mean, it could be as simple as something that's stuck inside of your auric field, or it could be, you know, spiritual processing and the reasons, you know, the reasons why you'd be hanging on to these types of things. So, you know, you really get to look at the different bodies. So the mental, like what mental process are you going through and habitual process are you going through that isn't serving you, that is causing you to go down the same pathways you always went. Emotionally, are you taking care of the problem? Are you forgiving yourself? Are you forgiving the other person or people for what happened? Are you going through the process where you're releasing it and just letting it go? You know, you don't need to hold on to these things anymore. At the level of the absolute, all you experience is the understanding that everything that you create here is a story. And everything else, it just doesn't matter. None of the stories matter at all. Just that feeling, that embodiment of that love and light is the only thing that matters. So once you ascend, like, it's so dense here with all of these stories. You rise up and you experience that. You don't want to experience the stories. You feel liberated from all of the things that you go through, all of the nonsense, all of the stuff that doesn't even matter. So part of reaching that healing in the spiritual body has to do with that understanding, right? So it's like, well, none of this really matters. So do I really need to hang on to it? No, you don't. You can let it go. So there you go.
I like how you bring up the simplicity of that is we don't have to hang on to anything, and it's the programs that we've adopted, it's the stories that we live by. Something that you helped me with that maybe can support our viewers in the collective is really painting that picture of looking at your daily life as a shoebox, and maybe you have multiple shoeboxes. You taught me this a while ago. And John, are we opening that same shoebox and, you know, bringing things out? Oh my gosh, this is that, this is this. And we're doing that every single day. And I loved how you brought the simplicity of, like, sometimes we just don't have to open that box anymore. We could burn it, we could throw it out the window because we haven't pivoted, you guys, to going into that closet and looking at all the other shoe boxes that we can open, that we can create, that so many gifts inside us, but we're so stuck on this one box that we've opened for years and years and years, and that's pretty much that process of healing of the four bodies in a big picture way. And so that really helped me get over some of the things I was playing in my life. And now I always think of that daily, Guru. So thank you for that. Kind of explain how you help other clients with that same painting that picture for them.
Yeah, that's, and it's interesting because men and women have a tendency to think of information slightly differently when it comes to compartmentalizing their thoughts. And so men have a tendency, generally speaking, not everyone, I can't speak for everyone, but generally speaking, because of the way men are wired and the way that women are wired based upon their biological processing and hormone levels and everything like that, there is, men will compartmentalize in a way that women don't, for the most part, depending on the level of testosterone. So there is, it's almost like men will compartmentalize their thoughts into little boxes. And I've watched a video that's pretty famous on this before, and I completely agree with it. So if it sounds familiar, you might have seen the same video, which is totally fine. But so a lot of the time when men will put their information into these little boxes, none of the boxes will touch each other. It's very compartmentalized and organized in that way. It's like I'm going into my nothing box. I'm going into my box where I'm thinking about food. I'm going into my box where I'm thinking about rest. And it's, it's very specific. But then we go into the way a lot of women think, and like I said, can't speak for everyone, but it's more like a ball of wire where we feel like everything's connected and everything relates to everything else. And, we're gathering evidence on our thoughts and our fears based upon the entire landscape a lot of the time. And again, that has to do with a lot of different things, hormone levels included. And, that's why a lot of the time men and women don't really understand each other. There's this difference of cognitive correlation that happens between the two. So as far as how to support people, it depends. If I have a man coming through and he's like a ball of wire, then I get to give him coaching and insight based upon his thought processes. And the same with a woman. So if someone comes in and they say, I think in the term of boxes, then the coaching would follow suit with that. And sometimes it's true. It is about examining those boxes and understanding, hey, do I have a use for this one still? It's on my shelf and it really is a heavy box. Do I really want to keep it? So getting rid of that makes sense. But, I'm not sure how helpful it is without actually understanding the teaching of how to get rid of these things. It's just kind of a metaphor of how to think about your thought process. So.
Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful picture because sometimes people think, why is this happening to me? Or why did this happen? And if they zoom out, they've been, how long? I think when you shared that with me, Guru, I was like, it makes sense. How many years have I been waking up, opening that same box? And it's just been so implemented into my mindset, into the neuroplasticity. And so that really made me think like, okay, yeah, I have a choice. I can, do the work and, get rid of this box or move past it. Or how many, like you said a little bit ago, is how long do I want to hold on to these things? I think that's what you asked me. I was like, I want to get rid of it today. So there's some things that people are holding on to, and I see it out there in the collective right now. And I don't know, and we're going to dive into some more questions here. I don't know if it's the spring energy. There's a lot of things going on astrologically, and a lot of things. It's the earthy life. It's the human experience. I did want to bring up first, because I didn't bring it up at the start, what restoration means, you guys. An act of restoring or the condition of being restored, such as bringing back to a former position or condition. And so I wrote down here Restoration. So if you think of the word restoration, there's that word rest. And so restoration back in God's image, resting in God's presence is what I wrote down. And so that was the download I got for any of you that, wanted to know what restoration really truly means. I wanted to ask you, Guru, what does restoration mean for you and your journey?
Renewal, to me, or restoration, definitely is about the death of the death of one thing and the rebirth of another, and which is very spring. It's very spring-like energy. So if we're really diving into that, it's about being okay with change. It's about being okay with starting something new and letting something else go. So it's about cleaning out your closets. It's about, in physically and mentally and emotionally as well. And not being afraid of what that looks like. So too many people have this connotation of death. Well, it's over, it's done. Once you're, I don't know if there's anything after we die. And that's true. No one really, 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 really does, because everyone that died is still dead, technically. So, but, and there's a lot of theories, and I have my own. But when it comes to rebirth here while we're alive, uh, a lot of the time people will have that feeling of, well, it feels like death to me, and that is the scariest thing, because if I no longer exist, then what? And the helplessness, the lack of control, all of that will flood to the surface when it comes to change. And that actually, a lot of that has to do with our neurological system and how it works, and keeping ourselves safe. Part of everything that we've been programmed to do our whole lives is to stay alive. And so if we're coming up to that one moment where we think we're going to die, then it's the most terrifying thing in the world. And that includes change, because change feels like death. And it is. They're little mini deaths and little mini rebirths. So I guess I would say realize that part of what you're going through is a false fear. It's a fear that your neurological system put into place because it wanted to make sure it kept you safe, even if it's not keeping you safe, changing the color of your socks for once, instead of always wearing black and all of a sudden wearing white, isn't going to, like, if it's eliciting fear. I know this is silly, but if it's eliciting fear, it's not actually dangerous to do that. So, and there's a lot of things out there that you could be changing that isn't actually dangerous, but it's going to bring up a lot of fear. So what I would encourage you to do, if these are innocent changes and they're not harmful, do them so that you can start to stretch and break through this fear and have your little mini deaths and your little mini rebirths, so that you know what you're truly capable of and you're no longer in a cage. Because the only way to do that is to go through it. The only way out through that is through. You got to go straight through it and work on your fear in that way. You get to have courage. You get to have courage. So that's what I would recommend.
I love that, Guru. I love how you said the mini deaths and rebirths. If we can really view whatever we're going through, in this time right now, we're all going through something. And if viewing it as that, it's such a good, it's like, hey, this is not going to last forever. This little mini death is going to birth something incredible. And so a lot of people are feeling, I guess, the spring energy. I don't know what lens you're seeing with your clients, Guru. Maybe you could share in a second. I wanted to ask you, why do at times, and you kind of answered it earlier, but why do at times people go back to maybe toxic situations, relationships, and they can't get out of like their karma, um, and cutting that cord for themselves? So you kind of brought up on the spiritual body, maybe their soul contract. I know we've talked about this before, maybe off camera, or offline, is sometimes you get to go back to a certain situation with a newer lens to kind of like take a look, right?
Yeah.
What And also sharing that, being safe, maybe in that toxic situation, that person, made you feel safe at some degree, but everyone on the outside is like, get out of there, or maybe it's a toxic job, like leave the job, like there's so much more potential for you. Can you just kind of share, um, through your lens and through your experiences with your clients, like what happens with that, exactly? Like, is it more towards a soul contract thing? Is it like more of an ego thing where they haven't really had an ego death of the whole situation?
So a lot of, and stop me if I'm wrong, but part of this this topic should probably include how it looks from looking from the outside in to somebody else, so that we can understand them a little bit better. And so I'd like to start on that, because it sounds as though it creates a lot of confusion for people looking at different lives, wondering why they're not doing different things in order to shift out of something that looks very toxic to them. Where if they just made a couple of pivots, maybe they would, you know, get into a healthy situation. So the problem is that, you know, we can't actually understand anyone else's life because we haven't gone through everything that they've been going through. So, and we can't judge their circumstances or conditions based upon our own. So what might be obvious, at least in our minds to us, isn't going to be obvious to somebody else. And to pin that on somebody else just because you think you have the answer is not okay. So, because it might not work for their life. Just because it would work for yours doesn't mean it would work for theirs. And people have a really hard time with this understanding, because they want to be right. They've lived their life, so they have an understanding of their life and all of their belief systems. And when they try to place that belief system upon somebody else, they don't understand why it doesn't work for them too. It's like, I feel very righteous when it comes to this, because I feel like this is true and this is true and this is true. And why aren't you doing this? And it's upsetting me, because obviously you're going against what I feel is totally wrong, you know? And that just doesn't work ever. It's a complete judgment. It's a blanket judgment. It's a lack of understanding of how people's consciousness works and how people's minds work. It's not fair to think that your one consciousness is the one and only consciousness on the entire planet and everyone else is wrong but you. You know, it's very arrogant to think that way. So really, it's about understanding that everyone's very diversified. I have never seen anyone come through my life who is the same, where I can treat them the same, talk to them the same, you know, explain things in the same way. I get to treat everyone just for who they are and talk to them as they are as an individual, because and I get to meet them where they're at, no matter who they are. So it never makes sense to me why somebody would, and it happens every single time, almost, well, a lot when I talk to people, where at one point they will think that, you know, what's going on, because they're right and this other person is wrong, and why aren't they doing what I think is right? And it's upsetting me. It's such a huge deal. It's such a huge deal. So the very first thing within that arena is that we get to understand that judgment gets to leave. It gets to get out of here. You know, it doesn't work. It's actually a very unintelligent way to think. Because if we're judging somebody else's life based upon our own circumstances and conditions, about our own experiences, then we're not really seeing the world, because there isn't a single being out there that has had your experiences. None of us have. So all we can do is sit there and relate to each other based upon our own circumstances and conditions. And that's not always going to work out, because we're, you know, depending on our experiences in our own lives, we're going to have a different reaction depending on, you know, what happened to you. So if we had something similar that you went through, or a similar situation, and we reacted and had a different experience or a different result, then our output is going to be different. We're going to say, well, no, you shouldn't do that, because this was my experience and I live in fear and blah, blah, blah. You know, so we get to have an understanding about how the world works in order to relate to each other a little bit better. Now, as far as people not being able to let these things go when they're in there, you know, when they're living in the situation. So if they're living in an abusive relationship or something, or they're living in a a situation where they get to let something go, it doesn't even matter what it is. It can be as simple as letting go of a place to live and getting a new one. If they're really attached to that place to live, it'll be really hard for them. And it might not be hard for the guy next door. Like, I'll move all the time. I don't care. But it might, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it would be, different life situations are going to be harder for people depending on their experiences in their life and why they're hanging on to it. So it's really difficult to encapsulate why people are going through what they're going through. But you can bet it has to do with the pain that they're going through, their experience of pain, and their avoidance of pain, if they are actually avoiding letting go of something. So the hoarding, it's almost like it can be a hoarding. It can be just like a holding close of, no, I gotta hang on to this. Sometimes the devil is better than the devil you don't. And sometimes they want to abuse themselves because that's what they feel like they're worth. So it's really hard to it's hard to encapsulate why, but there could be, and there are a number of different reasons why everyone does what they do. So a specific scenario might be more helpful for me to be a little bit less vague.
No, that was that was unbelievable, Guru. I love how you brought in so many points of, each person has a different lens. Each person has a human, earthy experience. And I think what you've taught me too, because early on, even you showed me like, hey, just listen more to people. We're at a stage in the collective where people just want to be heard, John, and not necessarily want to give, what is it, advice or something, because there's been so many times in my life where people come for so-called advice, but it's really just they came for listening, and I wasn't really hearing them. And that's been my growth of, hey, just being a safe spot for someone to share their truth. And majority of the time, that's what humans are looking for. And that's what the so-called connection word means, is a safe place where they could share their truth. They're not going to be judged. They're going to be safe, um, in terms of what they share with that person. And they know whatever's said between those two stays between those two. And so, with that being said, majority of the world does not work that way. And it's unfortunate because there would be more uh, deeper connections, I think, because we live in a very surface level. Hi, how's it going? How's your day been? Good. How are you feeling? Good. It's these one word responses rather than like, hey, how are you really feeling? And
Right.
them expanding on it. So I just want to thank you for bringing that up, because I was thinking of my own journey of how I've become more of a listener and holding space than someone giving me permission. Because I'll say it flat out now, is like, hey, I don't really like, I only know like your cliff notes of that story or your past. I've only known you for say 2 years. I don't know the rest of the however many years they've been here. I don't know the rest of that. So
Oh, and
how
just a point to that, not to interrupt you, but to interrupt you, I do apologize. Just because I want to throw this in and I want you to continue. I want to hear the rest. But there are four sides to every story. That's, the one person, the other person's story, and then it's their story together, and then the fourth would be the God view. And so you're never really going to get the full story. I totally agree with you. Go ahead.
I love that. The God view. That's a new one, I think, for me. I love that one. So yeah, it's really knowing the person, and I think we live in an age too. It's like a lot of times people don't know themselves to be able to fully share what's going on or what's truly bugging them, or hey, this person's frustrating me. Why aren't we seeing eye to eye? Well, there could be some missing information too, out of context, or um, bringing up things that are irrelevant to a story to find solutions. So, but you've really helped me in the fact of just looking at it on a different lens and just holding space for people. And the best question I think that I ask people daily without judgment, without, hey, this has worked for me. Like, I don't even get into that anymore of like, this is what like, if someone asks, like, hey, John, I've seen you change tremendously. What have you been doing? Maybe I'll share, hey, this has been working for me. This is my life. I've chosen this. I've never say, hey, this will work for you how it's worked for me, because it's like you said, it doesn't work that way. And that's, I think, the growth of myself in the last like year and a half of just like, hey, this is what I've been doing. If you want to join, cool. If you want to try it out, cool. That's for you. But I was saying is, there's a lot of times where we don't know enough of the person to really give any feedback. So what I was getting at is my best question I love to ask people. And I don't know, I think it was from you, Guru, originally when I first started working with you, is asking people whenever they share a story, whatever the context, all you have to say is, how can I support you? Because
Yep.
majority of times, and this is what, Guru, you're getting at, is we go off of our own experience. I have no idea what this person's going through, so why am I going to go, oh yeah, like, and you'll hear it, and it just, when I'm in the collective presence out in the environments and out in the world, it just makes my ears cringe when someone just missed it out of the ballpark. Like, hey, this person just wants you to listen, and then they go on to, oh yeah, this and that happened to me, and then the other person's face is like, wow, you weren't even listening to what I was trying to share of, this or that, or this happened. I just love saying, hey, how can I support you? And just being quiet. And then they just go off. Hey, you know what? Just listening to this really has supported me. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you so much. You know, but yeah, if you wanted to add anything to that, because that was really instrumental in my pivots and in my growth of my restoration is, yeah, all our things we have gone through are going to help the collective, you guys. At the same time, we are learning from each other, and we get to support each other, and we choose to support by asking better questions. And that's one of my favorite questions, whether in life, relationships, business, with strangers. Hey, how can I support you? If someone comes in, hey, this happened in my car, this, okay, how can I support you?
Exactly. I totally. Oh my
Good
gosh.
pointer.
It's brilliant. No, it's brilliant, and it's true. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because when it comes to relating and talking to people, the one thing that is constantly missed in communication with the average people is that they do not know how to be selfless in the conversation and take themselves out of the picture. So, and they'll make it about them, and it is the dynamic that we talked about earlier, that where you're only going to see what you want to see in somebody else, and you're not actually going to see them. Because you can only relate to them based upon your own circumstances, conditions, and all of that. But there is a way to step out of that and become selfless and just walk into their experience and not make it about all of your stuff. And that's when you're really going to hear someone. You're not going to hear someone until you do that. And so, what you were talking about, and tell me if I'm hitting the mark or if I'm wrong, it sounds as though your attempt at communication now has to do with that understanding that, hey, I don't really know what the issue is truly, and I never will. But what I want to do is be of the highest support to you at this time, so that you can walk through this with a little bit more grace and feel as though somebody is really listening to you, and hopefully that's what you need. And then after that, it's like, I can only relate from my own experiences, but, maybe this would support you if you tried this. I know it supported me. I've seen it support other people. I'm not sure if it'll work for you, but still with the understanding of my life is not your life. And it's okay if my belief system or what I tried doesn't work for you, but it was helpful for me, and we're both humans, so maybe this can work. But coming from that place of understanding that you know, that it's okay, that diversity is okay. We must embrace it as a collective. We must embrace the idea that we're all so different from each other in the way that we think. We do have similarities, but I think that with the similarities, people get confused and think that we're the same people and that everything is going to apply to every single person, and it's not. I think a lot of our systems is based upon that kind of way of thinking, and I don't think it's okay. You know, you'll go into a lot of the time, you'll go into a doctor's office and they don't really hear you. They hear the symptoms, and it's like, well, I'm a human being and I have other things going on, and maybe, you know, but I don't think a lot of the time it's their fault either. It's the way the system is set up. So, and it's a lot. It's with that with almost every industry. There are mindful companies and businesses out there that don't operate that way, and they really do hear you, and people love that because it's, you know, they feel heard and understood. But this is part of the formula on how to do that, and it's a good one. So I'm glad you brought it up.
So good, Guru. Yeah, you exactly heard it right in terms of just really listening to the person, and then also, the word that's been coming up for me in those instances is like a collaboration. You know, you're asking for permission, one, and then you're saying, hey, like you said it beautifully, like, I don't know your exact situation. Something similar, not exactly, because each situation is different. Something that's similar that has happened. I could share it with you if you're open. But at the end of the day, how can I support you through this? And so it's definitely a higher conscious of thinking and higher conscious way of speaking. And it's also powerful because it really shows, and it goes off of what we're talking about, restoring our communication, restoring our relationships, and restoring our posture. And I recently came across a video about the them theory, is like, let them do them, right? Why are we live in a society where we want to know everything or know the details. Maybe it's like, hey, why didn't they invite me here? Why are they doing this? Why? Let them do them, right? Focus on your restoration, focus on your life, what brings you joy, what brings you blissful moments. And I thought that was interesting too, because old versions of myself, I was like, why would they do that? Them, you know, they aren't inviting me, you know, or I think, for example, like social media highlights so many things that, or the word, the fear of missing out for a lot of people. Like, why did they go on that trip with that group of friends? Like, I'm part of that. Well, maybe you're not, you know, or why are they doing this? Or why is my partner out with those friends? I've never heard of those people. Um, so that them theory is like, let them do them. And you're right where you need to be in your restoration and your rest. We got a few more. I know our time. So why, Guru, why does our restoration really have no true expiration?
Well, we're infinite, and we're, you know, our souls are immortal, and so therefore, if we are our souls, if we are that energetic assimilation that's keeping our body animated, then, you know, there is no bounds, there is no boundaries. We can, you know, we can utilize the spirit to heal every aspect of our being. You know, the mental, emotional, physical, and so we're boundless in that way. So yeah, our restoration can be absolute all of the time. And it's, if you think of it in the opposite way, it's almost as if you're saying that you don't have the resources in order to heal. I'm just going to say hello to this person really quick. Hi. In order to heal. So, and that's not true. I mean, we're master creators and manifestors. And so we're capable of creating and manifesting whatever we want. And people will say, no, well, I always create the things that are awful. Well, it doesn't mean that you're not being a master manifester. You're just creating the things that your consciousness thinks you want. Because maybe you spend a lot of time thinking about those things instead of thinking about what you want to create. So if you're thinking about all the things that are going to go wrong and worrying about them and perseverating on those for hours on end, then your consciousness is going to think, oh, this is what I want to create. So therefore, I'm going to produce this. And then you're going to get more of that. And you're thinking, well, what the hell? What is going on? But that's why. That's why. So, and it doesn't go just in the conscious mind, it goes deeply into the unconscious. So you get to kind of weed out everything. And then if there's still issues, then maybe you haven't looked at all the 4 bodies. And then if there's still issues on top of that, then maybe it's in your bloodline. So there's a lot of different solutions, but if you know how to look for them, you're going to find them. But yes, so I think your statement, just when I hear it, it makes me feel like, well, otherwise you're going to be suggesting that you're not resourceful, that you're not capable of healing yourself at any given moment, and that just is not true. You can do it right now if you wanted to, in an instant. If you were really surrendered to the point of absolutism, you could become enlightened in this very moment if you wanted to, but you would really get to have like that full, I'm ready to die for this surrender, and and you probably get to make sure everything else is purified to a state where it's possible. But anyway, so that's what I think of that.
So beautifully said. I think it's such a great way to live and a great mindset to have, you guys, every single day. What do you get to choose to restore? What do you get to bring in that's new to your restoration each and every day? We love to end on call to actions, Guru. So what are some ways that people can look at their restoration, or what are some things that you suggest that they can start doing? Maybe they've come across our page. Maybe, I know we have a lot of new viewers, you guys. So thank you so much for viewing our lives. What are some of the practices you would suggest in regards to restoration?
So I would say in order to restore, you must make the space to become something new. So you get to see what isn't serving that's in the way first, and do it with courage. So if it's about choosing something simple like making sure that you don't lie anymore to yourself or other people, or if it's about restoring the way that you treat your physical body, be it with food, exercise, water, or maybe it's about honoring your feelings in a way that you never have before, because perhaps in the past all you did was ignore it. How are you going to restore different aspects of your bodies and your consciousness? Have the courage to look at yourself and be accountable for what you're creating, and decide, what gets to shift, in order for you to be more effective than you are now. So that's what I would recommend, is just your honesty and your accountability, the courage to look at what you're creating, what your output is, so that you can begin to create something that is more effective and will ultimately make you happier.
So good, Guru. Let's go. That fires me up too. I loved how you're highlighting a lot of great things on that. So, yeah, you guys, if you have questions, definitely drop them in the chat. I always like to ask this, and Guru knows this, is like, what was your biggest takeaway from this episode? We always love to hear biggest takeaways. Drop that in the comments. We love you guys so much. We're here for you. If you have, well, I'll let Guru do that. But yeah, we don't do any commercials or things of that nature. All we ask is that you share this with someone you love, share this with someone that might, want to hear this message or gets to hear this message. And we just appreciate you. We love you, and can't wait for episode 16 next week. If you have anything that you're passing through right now in your life that you're like, hey, I just want some clarity, feel free to ask us, and we could have a full-blown episode about what you're going through. Obviously, your names are safe, so we never bring up any names. But yeah, I'll hand it over to Guru, where you can find her and ask questions.
Hey, so absolutely, the chat or the comments below is always a great place to go, so that we can take a look and support you. If you have a long question that you don't want to put in the chat, and you don't really want other people to necessarily see it that way, that's okay. You can email me. I have my email address available for anyone that wants to reach out in that way, and it's available for press too, because press reaches out. Uh, and I do, I have several articles online, so if you haven't looked those up yet, please do check them out. I also actually wanted to mention that part of the reason why, and I have a lot of people asking me why, so I get to say it here, and this is on both of my channels, why I haven't been doing any teaching videos lately. And I want you to know that it's been on my mind, but the problem is that I'm trying to create a mastermind program right now. So a lot of the teaching videos that I'm creating right now are going to that instead. And and we're having a launch date that's kind of coming up pretty close in the future. And we're getting all of the employees together, and it's taking a lot of time, which I'm excited about. And it does have to do with it's the full meal deal as far as becoming a practitioner within the sixth sense sciences. So whether you're just doing a meditation, or if you're a healer, or if you're a psychic, or whatever that you're trying to create as a practitioner in that way, in the spiritual realm, this program has to do with the creating the business. Complete business marketing module program. We've spent a lot of money and time to get the best information, to teach people how to do this quickly and effectively, and for them to scale. And we're talking really scaling, astronomical number scaling, and just the really intensive emotional intelligence knowledge that everyone in their life really should have, because you're only as good as your emotional intelligence, honestly, when it comes to you being effective at anything. So there's that's specifically manufactured. It's a lot of stuff that is so deep I don't even talk about it on here. And then it's the spiritual tool and mindset, but it's your toolbox as far as how to be able to do things really, really effectively when it comes to using the types of energy and intuition and sixth sense stuff that can only be offered to you by somebody who's doing it the way that there's a lot of great healers out there, and they're fantastic. I just hope that my tools will support you within the realm of this program. So hopefully you love it. There isn't a program out there at all like this. We've looked, we've found a lot of garbage, and we really just wanted to push out something that people could really use and love. So we believe we've created that, and we're really, really excited about it too. So hopefully you love it just as much as we do. And we're excited about sharing the launch with you within the next little while. So I've talked a little bit about it here and there. I've hinted at it, but I haven't really talked too much about it. But so just so you know, it's pretty much here within the next week or two. We're that close, so I'm really excited. But that's why I haven't been doing the videos, so I do apologize. As soon as this starts rolling, I'll be able to start pushing out the videos like I did before. So please be patient with me, and I love you and I'm grateful. So that's it. So John, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, love you guys so much. Stay tuned for all that great flow from Guru, and we just appreciate you guys. Love you guys, and have an incredible week full of blessings and miracles and love. See you guys next week.
Bye, everyone.